I think it's a tough day for our country, to be honest.
What we've failed to have to date is accountability up to the highest levels in the Australian military.
Ben Roberts-Smith, our most celebrated soldier, found to be a murderer, a bully and a war criminal in a sensational defamation trial that sent shockwaves around the world.
A day of reckoning.
One of Australia's most decorated
Ben
soldiers.
Roberts-Smith has lost a landmark defamation case.
The 5-year legal battle against 3 newspapers upholding claims that the former SAS soldier murdered an innocent Afghan civilian and incited subordinates to kill 2 others.
This is a step forward on a path of justice for these Afghan families, but they have not been delivered fair compensation.
Pressure's now on the country's dedicated war crimes investigator to prosecute Roberts-Smith in a criminal court, which has a higher burden of proof than a civil defamation trial. If successful, it could see him locked away for life.
Let's get these matters dealt with beyond a reasonable doubt by a jury and we can get to the truth.
And as the Defence Force community reels, calls are growing to strip Ben Roberts-Smith of his accolades.
There are 2 things that need to be done as a matter of urgency now. The first is for the War Memorial to remove the current display, which is an unquestioning praise of Ben Roberts-Smith. And the second is to urgently remove the medals that he's received.
I think his uniform should remain there, but with text that makes clear that this man who was regarded as Australia's greatest hero is now disgraced. As to whether he should be stripped of his VC, the only precedents for that are men who had committed criminal offences.
This afternoon, the National War Memorial announced it will consider adding context to Roberts-Smith's uniform display.
Just because a man is a hero in the front line doesn't mean that he's good in other aspects of his life. And I think that's a salutary lesson that we should tell the good and the bad about Australians' experience in war.
So, as Ben Roberts-Smith and his lawyers consider mounting an appeal, how does the Defence Force and the country reckon with this legacy?
International Affairs editor Hugh Remington has been covering the case. He joins us now. Hugh, how likely are we to see criminal charges stem from this?
Well, this, of course, is the big question. There is a thing called the Office of the Special Investigator, sexy name. It has a $60 million a year budget. It has 160 staff. It's almost like its own police force. It's been investigating for the last 3 years credible evidence of 39 unlawful killings in Afghanistan. So this goes well beyond allegations against Ben Roberts-Smith. They have been in court. They watch what has been going on. I'm told by legal sources that it is more likely now that they will proceed with a criminal investigation if they think it meets the threshold for prosecution. So it's highly likely that Ben Roberts-Smith will come into a court at some stage, and all of this will be tested to that higher criminal proof or criminal standard of beyond reasonable doubt.
Hugh, so much of the way this has all played out over the past 24 hours has framed it as a battle between Ben Roberts-Smith and the media, even some big millionaire media barons involved. But at the core of this, isn't it a story about some Afghans who died unjustly?
It is about murder. It's about people who were taken under control. Some of them might have been insurgents, but at the time in which they were in the hands of the Australian troops, they were not a threat. They were prisoners. The allegations before the court that Judge Bosanko found were sufficiently convincing were that they were taken and shot dead, murdered. Now, plainly, this is much more than a battle between the media and individuals. I think the other battle that's going on, which has been so difficult for Special Forces soldiers, has been between soldiers, because what we've seen again and again through this extensive court case was soldiers who were at the same location giving on oath just completely incompatible accounts of what took place there, that nothing happened, or alternatively, that there were people being murdered. And that has caused enormous splits in the Special Forces and the broader Australian Defence Force community.
Hugh, there's also the question of Ben Roberts-Smith's uniform display at the War Memorial and his status as Australia's most decorated living military veteran. How can we reckon with that legacy?
Well, it seems as though, at the very least, and we've heard a clue of this from Kim Beazley, who's now the chairman of the Australian War Memorial, that some context, at the very least, has to be attached to the displays there that show him almost as the ideal modern warrior. There's also the issue of his Victoria Cross. There were 8 Victoria Cross recipients have lost their Victoria Crosses because of events afterwards, including one after he was court-martialed for desertion. But the last one was more than 100 years ago, after King George V said even a murderer should be able to wear his VC up to the scaffold. In other words, to be hanged and executed for his crimes. So this would be a major thing. If he was to be found guilty of a criminal offence, there'd be enormous pressure to strip away the VC. Short of that, it's hard to imagine that a defence minister, it would sit with the defence minister, would bring that action on, although there are calls for him to do so.
Hugh Remington, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And if you find yourself in need of help for any reason, crisis support is available 24/7 through Lifeline on 13 11 14.